Thank you for joining us on our YouTube channel here. My name is Jamie Birch. I'm the CEO and founder of JEB Commerce. Today is a special day. We have Mickey Quinn with us here. Mickey and I, we actually worked at Coldwater Creek, but not at the same time, or did we have a couple years overlapping?
Yes, we did.
Yeah, and so Mickey has 30 years of experience in retail, both in operations, in-store operations, and merchandising. She's worked for JCPenney, Barnes & Noble, Coldwater Creek, and was the CEO of Vanity, a women's specialty apparel retailer. Currently, you are the founder of Mickey Quinn Consulting. And Mickey advises retailers, companies, and individuals on new business ventures, retail operations, cultural improvements, and leadership team development. One of the reasons I wanted to bring Mickey here was she specializes in brick and mortar, and now in the age of Amazon and the retail apocalypse, she knows how that retailers, brick and mortar retailers, can be successful and what's important to them. So that's what we're going to talk about today. A lot of our viewers are retailers, so this should be a really enlightening and in-depth dive into what do you do in the age of Amazon with all these retailers closing. How are you going to be successful? So, Mickey, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Jamie.
Yeah. So tell us now. We've had to have met at Coldwater Creek because I remember when we met again. I immediately recognized your name. So either we had met or your name and reputation precedes you. But we met at a chamber event. Both of us kind of not knowing if it was going to be great or what was going to happen, and we met each other. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
But tell me, how'd you get there? Like, where'd you start? How'd you get in retail? Tell me your story.
So I went to RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology, for college, and I had a really smart guidance counselor because I wanted to major in drama and singing, and the guidance counselor said, why don't you major in business and then you can do the other stuff, extracurricular.
Oh no!
And see how it goes. I was like, okay, that's great. So I got my business degree and had tellered at Chase Lincoln Bank in Rochester for the summers, and went to my branch manager when I had my degree.
And that's New York, Rochester,
yes,
New York.
Rochester,
Okay.
New York. So
East Coast, right on.
Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
Pennsylvania.
Okay. Oh, neighbors.
Yeah.
So I went to my branch manager and I said, okay, I'm ready to be a manager. And she's like, whoa, you got to pay your dues.
Yeah.
I'm like, I thought I already did. I got my degree, So, and I didn't know what to do. So I took a job as a sales associate at Brooks Fashions in the mall in Rochester, Marketplace Mall. And I was there for about 2 weeks, and the store manager said, hey, the district manager's coming, wants to talk to you. I was like, okay.
Oh no.
Why? And he's like, yeah, he just wants to talk to you. So I didn't know it, but I, went out to the food court with the district manager, which was, that's the district manager's office in the mall.
And the food court's the place to be back then.
Well, yeah, back then sure was. And he just asked me a few questions, and next thing I knew, I was promoted to assistant store manager.
Right on.
And I was like, okay, this retail thing's pretty good. I like this retail thing.
Yeah.
So from there, I went to JCPenney, and back in that day, department stores had the best training programs for their management teams. So I went through the management training program there and worked my way up to department manager. At that time, the corporate office was moving from New York City to Texas, to Dallas, and they had to bring people in from the field to fill the people that weren't going to move with them. So I had a great opportunity to become assistant buyer. And was assistant buyer, moved up to buyer, marketing programs manager, communications manager, to the president of the women's division. And then my husband at the time said, it's not cool to stay with one company for your entire career. And he got himself recruited to Coldwater Creek.
Oh, wow.
And that's when I joined Coldwater, managing their first store in Sandpoint, Idaho. 16,000 square foot.
At the bridge?
Yes, at the bridge, which was kind of like running a mall.
Yeah. It's always been a weird space.
Yeah. Very challenging, but had that opportunity and then continued to follow his career. So went to Wallace's bookstores in Kentucky and managed college bookstores across the country.
Wow, you have been all over.
Yes. And then I was a district manager with Barnes & Noble, and then came back to Coldwater after September 11th happened, and we just wanted a smaller community.
Yeah.
and came back as store operations manager just when Coldwater started a major retail expansion.
Yeah.
They had about 20 stores at that time and took them through the next 11 years, and we opened over 500 locations.
Wow. And at that time, were you overseeing, or was Coldwater was building stores inside in Sandpoint, like tests, right? We
Oh,
had
yes.
those tests in the warehouse.
Yes, we did the virtual store.
Yeah,
Yes.
those were pretty cool.
Yeah, it was really neat. And it afforded them the opportunity to create that consistency so that when a customer walked into a store in Columbus, Ohio, or in Dallas, Texas, it wasn't the same footprint, but the presentation looked and felt and smelled and sounded the same.
Yeah, that's something in the packet you sent me that we'll talk about later. That word consistent.
Yes.
Consistency is something that we're going to talk about
Mhm.
of that experience. And I remember being on the web. We had that store in town, but it always felt like that's our flagship. It's local. It's a little different,
Mhm.
and not having the experience of going around, but seeing those virtual stores, having the whole corporate be able to see that and feel that and smell it and be in that was pretty cool.
Mhm.
I felt that
Yes.
tied everything together.
Yeah, it really showed the consistency of the brand.
Yeah. And so that's a great story. Like, you don't hear a lot where people started on the floor
Mhm.
and then made it into headquarters.
Mhm.
And then president of the women's division at JCPenney, you said?
Reporting to.
That's
Yes.
that's fantastic. What has been the biggest learning for leadership during that time for you?
I'd say probably the biggest thing is, well, two. One, at Penny's, they had a slogan that was, our number one priority is customer service. And it was on your CRT, your computer terminal.
Oh, yeah.
Those big clicky things. That was the first thing that came up. And I remember when I was at the store, fully drank the Kool-Aid, believed it. When I got to corporate, I didn't hear them talk about the customer.
Oh, wow.
And so it was, okay, that's our slogan, but they didn't really live it.
It was a slogan there.
Yes.
Not a value.
Right. And then when I joined Coldwater, it was so evident that first and foremost, the customer was the first thing that the team always thought about. You filtered everything through the customer's perspective.
Yeah.
And that really resonated, and that mission or vision, or that commitment to who we are as a brand permeated throughout the entire company. Yeah. And I really learned the difference between having a slogan and really living it.
Yeah. And I think I remember she had a name.
Oh, yeah.
I want to say James.
There was like
were
Katie, or there was three different,
Gabe, do you remember?
Katie, Catherine. There was a third one.
There was a third. Yeah.
Awesome. And so now, tell me about what you're doing now.
So now I have started my own consulting company, and I'm focusing on helping retailers and those who work in the retail industry survive and thrive in the age of Amazon.
Yeah. And the age of Amazon. Retail is shutting down. Every store is closing. No one's buying at brick and mortar anymore. We're all going to be shopping at Amazon. Right? That's where we're going, right?
That's certainly what you see in the news, and you hear it every day with, what retailer now is filing for bankruptcy.
Yeah.
And it certainly sounds like obituaries
Mm-hmm.
when you see those articles. But
even driving by some of those big box strip malls.
Yes.
You wonder what are they going to put in there?
Yes. I was at NRF's big show, not this past January, but a year ago, January. And one of the presentations was talking about just this: how do you survive in the age of Amazon?
Yeah.
And they had stats that showed that in 2017, 90% of all purchases in the U.S. were made in a physical location.
Wow.
And the researchers were predicting that by 2020, 85% will still be made in a brick and mortar location.
That just seems unbelievable to me, because the way that I shop is, unless it's like hardware for a project at home, a screw or something.
Yeah.
I almost all online.
Oh, that's interesting.
So still 85% will be shopping in store.
That's the prediction by 2020. Yes.
Yeah, so we're
So-
talking, 5 points from last year,
2017 to 2020.
2020.
So
Oh,
in
okay,
3
so
years.
5 points in 3 years.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem like an apocalypse.
No. I mean, it's brick and mortar is not going anywhere. In fact, even I've read some articles where millennials actually prefer to shop in person and prefer to shop in brick and mortar. And it's also proven that a customer shopping in a location has a higher propensity to buy when they are being helped by a knowledgeable salesperson.
Is that kind of showrooming? Like I know that was a big topic maybe a year or two ago of people going to Target with their phone and buying on Amazon or Target or other retailers setting up their stores so they could purchase online, but they're still coming to get that experience online. So is that
Oh, I
a
think it's
big part of it?
I think it's a major part of it, and it's been proven that customers who shop your brand online and in your store, and if you had a catalog too, the customer who shops in multiple locations, multiple channels of your brand, are your best customers and will spend more. So yes, there's showrooming. Your every customer has the ability to be, the smartest person in the store because they've researched before they even walk in.
And they can research right on the fly, right?
Yes.
They know price, they know
Yep, everything's so
availability.
transparent now. I mean, the
Yeah.
customer probably knows what you're offering online as a retailer, sometimes even more than your store associates.
Yeah.
So there's nothing to hide. So the most important thing you can do is create an experience that is welcoming and engaging, and it makes the customer want to come to your store because it makes them feel good.
So before we talk about that, the experience, you've had the either good fortune or misfortune. You worked at some of these retailers that have closed
Yes.
and that have fallen. So you've got to see firsthand some of the mistakes that they made. Where do they fail? Where are the retailers failing that they're having to either downsize considerably or completely close and shutter their doors?
There's been consistent themes, and I've worked for 6 major retailers across the U.S., national retailers. And in each of those companies, there were consistent themes when things started, the wheels started to come off the bus. And it was when the senior executive teams stopped being curious and stopped listening to what the customers were saying and what the employees who served those customers on the front lines were hearing, what the customers' pain points were, and trying to get that information back up to the decision makers. It was when that senior team started to think that they knew more than what the customers and what the employees wanted to share.
And so were they rigid and not moving? Because the customers are shopping different now. Their behaviors changed. Were
Oh,
they
yes.
just rigid in what they were doing? Was it product? They weren't listening to what the customer wanted to buy, or
Yeah, there was a combination in each of the retailers. There were different sets of details, but a lot of it was rigidity or cutting costs to bolster up the bottom line. And one of the first costs often is the labor in the brick and mortar stores.
yeah.
And that is, that's probably the kiss of death because you're pulling back in an area where you really should be investing, because if the experience is what the customer wants
Yeah.
and you start cutting back on the labor, then you're overworking those associates. They're not enough of them to serve the customer, to give that good experience, and so it's a downward spiral.
It seems some sort of common sense for us who've been in this space a long time or shop that you want to be taken care of and you want some positive experience to have that in the store, and then they're cutting that out, that labor, good people. Do you think are they siloing the channels and not looking how that great training program for frontline staff leads to catalog sales or email signups or online sales. Do you think that's part of it? Like they're still managing it as here's the web, here's catalog, here's store, and not like here's the customer. And then the customer is doing these things. Let's focus on it. Do you think that's part of it, or is there something else that gets them stuck?
Yeah, I think that definitely you hit an important point there, because the structure of, especially older retailers that have been around for, more than 20 or 30 years, you have those silos and those teams built up based on the channel, and yet the customer doesn't think of her experience with that brand like that. It's the customers.
It's all one.
It's all one.
Yeah.
And so breaking down, you're talking, organizational structure changes, technology challenges. How do you manage your inventory? So if a company, a retailer, isn't investing in the infrastructure, then, and I've seen that happen too, where you stick with the same computer programs, and oh no, it's too expensive to update. And then you suddenly are found, you're like, well, how do I manage inventory when I'm selling it online and I have it in the warehouse and I have to have it for brick and mortar too? So everything's changing so quickly. If you stop investing in your infrastructure, then yeah, you can. That has been the demise of several retailers, because they just couldn't come up with the funds to catch up.
Yeah. Once they knew they had to change, they couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned communication. I just read the book, The Power of Habit. I don't know if you've read that. It's a great book. One of the examples they give is Alcoa Aluminum. And I think Paul O'Neill came in to run Alcoa Aluminum. And the first thing he did to turn the company around was they talked about safety. And they're going to have no injuries, no deaths, no injuries, zero in making aluminum, which is kind of was unheard of at the time. He did that, and one of the side effects that they found when the company turned around was, in order to have that happen, the communication from the frontline employee, the injuries had to be communicated to the CEO within 24 hours. In order to do that, they had to change the entire communication structure so that could happen. And it turned it around. The executives knew what was going on and what needed to be changed, and everyone was around a common goal. So you mentioned something similar of like executives not listening.
Yes.
And that's a common thing. Is it structural? Is it just the organization itself?
Well, I think it starts at the top. So if the CEO genuinely wants to hear what's going on, then it makes all the difference in the world. So a certain level of humility, and encouraging leaders to get over themselves. Like, you're very good at what you do, but you don't know everything. And so being open to learning and being curious. The best ideas come from the people who are working on those front lines.
So has this adjustment just been something our industry needed to learn? And pride comes before the fall. One thing you haven't mentioned yet is Amazon came and took our lunch. Like, you haven't said that. The problems with those companies and the ones you've worked with and that have struggled, it's been communication. It's been stuck in old ways, not listening to the customer. Those things. You haven't mentioned Amazon. So is it just the natural cycle of, we had a boom in this area, and the things that don't work, when we start to refine that process, and the wheat gets separated from the chaff, so to speak? Do you think that's what's going on?
I think that's a lot of it. I mean, the retail industry has evolved, multiple times throughout. The Industrial Revolution changed things, and importing changed things, and where things were manufactured. So it's not like this is the first time that we've had this trough of people going out of business because the rules have changed. So I think you're right that this is, we have to reinvent ourselves, and there's new, better technology. There's new ways of doing things that we didn't even think of 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And so paying attention to those and figuring out, okay, what does this mean for us, and how are we going to adapt?
Yeah, adaptability. So we talked about the obstacles. Tell me One of the things you mentioned is we used to talk about the 4 Ps, but you have something else you talk about now. So
Yes.
share with me what those are.
Yeah.
So going forward, like how do they thrive?
Mhm.
You have the 4 Cs.
The 4 Cs, yes. So the first C is the customer. And that the customer holds the power now. I mean, they're walking around with a little computer in their hand. And as we talked about before, the complete transparency, quite often the customer knows even before they walk into the store what the price is going to be and even whether or not the store has one.
Yeah.
With all of this technology. And so personalization and customization is really important. And there is just a wealth of information that retailers can get on their customers. But doing that customization and personalization, it has to be genuine and authentic. And a great example of what's not genuine or authentic is I was shopping on Amazon. I shop there too, for certain things. And, my screen was loading slowly and I accidentally clicked on, it must have been like a hand drill or something. And so then for weeks, Amazon kept recommending products for me
It's
based
probably
on that
followed
one.
you around the web.
Oh my gosh, yes. And that was a classic. It
Yeah.
was such a visualization of this is not genuine and authentic. I mistakenly clicked on something and now, ooh, this is what Mickey wants. That's not real.
Yeah.
And so focusing on the customer and then customizing that experience for them and making it genuine and authentic is key in this new environment. The second C is commitment to the brand. And that is what we were talking about earlier too, consistency. And that's something that Coldwater did really well back in the day during the heyday. I think Starbucks is another great example. If the two of us were dropped into a Starbucks where all of the logos and the word Starbucks were removed from everything, I bet you we'd still figure out that we were in a Starbucks.
There's an old Starbucks on Hayden Avenue
Mm-hmm.
that isn't a Starbucks anymore, but they didn't redecorate it.
Ah.
And I went there 4 times before I realized it wasn't a Starbucks. So
Oh, wow.
I agree
Yeah.
with you, yeah.
Yeah. And they also are a great example of their commitment to consistency and to the customer. And then to the other two things that I'll mention. The third C is controllables. And when you are running multiple locations and they're remote, so it's not like you can run down and, check on that location easily. You have to have standards of operation. So just the administration, it's the stuff that you need to do consistently in all locations that's going to keep you out of jail. And it's going to,
It's a good bar to hit right there, right?
Good. Yeah, there's just certain things. It's kind of like the price of admission. If
Yeah.
you're going to run multiple locations, you have to have that standard operating procedure that everybody adheres to, no exceptions.
And you need a way to measure that, I would assume too. So
Yeah.
you not being in every location, you can quickly.
Right.
see
Yeah,
those.
and there's great, again, back to technology and what's available now. Taking the deposit to the bank every day. You should have the ability so that your finance department, your accounting department can check that to make sure that it actually happened and there's not a delay in that
It
communication.
seems like foundational stuff has to be solid.
Yes, absolutely. And then the fourth C is the core, which are your people. And that is so important to developing that relationship with the customer and investing in your people, not only just hiring the right people, but then there has to be a reason for them to stay. And I read an article recently that said the most dissatisfied employees, which industry has the most dissatisfied employees? And it was retail, restaurant, hospitality.
Oh wow.
And it doesn't have to be. I mean,
Yeah.
those are things that when you go out and spend money, you want to be happy, and you want people who are happy
All
to
customer facing frontline
Yes.
stuff.
Yes. So I think that's a sign that a lot of retailers are missing the mark in not investing in their people, paying a living wage, reinvesting in their people by training and having managers that respect and engage their employees so that they enjoy coming to work.
Yeah.
Because however you treat your employees, that's how they're going to treat your customer. And so it's just this interconnected circle. If you have the right employees, they're going to make your customers feel great. They're going to make the store look good, and you're going to, have a great return on that investment.
Yeah, my sister works in the healthcare field and wrote an article last year along the same lines of how that industry doesn't take care of its frontline people either, and people are leaving the industry, and these are educated, well paid to an extent individuals, and they're having trouble keeping those people. So it seems like it's that's the apocalypse. So that's the pandemic is how we're taking care of those people who are taking care of us, whether that's retail or anything else. Seeing it in other industries too.
Yes.
Tell me more about what does it look like for a retailer to who is doing that well with their staff, and what does that look like? What's the nuts and bolts of if you were to come into I'm asking you like 9 questions at once, but who's doing it well? What does that look like to do that really well?
Well, again, I think Starbucks is a great example. They provide benefits even to part-time employees. They staff correctly, because they understand that when people come in, they understand the needs of the customer. They want speed, but then again, there's different customer groups. Some want speed to get their coffee and go, and others want the experience to have a chat and relax in the comfy couches. So it's again, paying attention to what the customers and what your frontline employees are saying, and really anticipating what the next trend is going to be and investing in that.
And I was going to ask you how do they anticipate the trend, but it's probably the same. Listening to their customers, listening to their frontline employees,
absolutely,
seeing how those trends are changing. The one in some of the info you sent me, you had what I thought was kind of a fifth C or a sub C of consistency. You mentioned consistency, and how does that relate to all of these 4?
Well, when a customer experiences the brand, whether it's online or in a brick and mortar store, it should look, taste, feel, sound the same. And the only way that you can achieve that is if you have that consistency across the brand, and having a branding statement that everyone in the company can use to filter decisions through that. How is the customer going to perceive this? Is it what we're deciding to do? Is that going to be consistent with what they expect the brand to be for them right now? Or is it an evolution, but it still feels that it's consistent with our brand? That's okay. I mean, change needs to happen, and we all have to adapt, and we have to anticipate where we need to make those changes. But you don't want to go from point A to point Z and leave the customer wondering, gosh, am I in the right store? Where am I? But you have to. Have you heard of the term boiled frog?
Yeah. Tell me more about it. Make sure I'm thinking the same analogy.
So if you want to boil a frog, which is horrible, no frogs were.
Who wants to boil a frog?
I don't know. Maybe for frog legs, I'm not sure. But if you want to boil a frog, you don't have a pot of boiling hot water and throw the frog in, because it'll just jump out.
Yeah.
So you put it in at the same temperature of the room and then raise the heat.
Yeah.
So the customer's experience is kind of like that. You don't want to dramatically change their experience. So if you're going to make some evolutions to the brand and make some changes to, catch up with what's happening in, in the U.S. and in the industry, you want to make those changes incrementally so that you don't confuse the customer as to who you are.
So boil a frog.
Okay.
I think
Boil
of New
frog.
Coke as like the way not to do it.
Yes.
Yeah. So one thing we haven't talked a lot about is the web. So for you've worked for really big retailers, and I know in our conversations you've consulted for smaller retailers. How big, and maybe it's divided by type of retailer, but how big is the web as a channel? Can a brick and mortar store survive without a web presence? How does that integrate into succeeding in this new climate?
Yeah, well, there are retailers out there, small ones, that don't offer their product online. You can't buy it online. You have to go into the store. And there are examples of them doing well. Usually they're smaller and not as widespread geographically. So there's a following locally, and there's a reason, to go to that location. It's kind of like, to experience it, they have to go there.
Yeah.
But it's certainly for mid to larger size retailers, being able to offer the product online it's kind of like a requirement.
Yeah. Yeah, it's another foundational item.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to have it.
Yeah.
How if we have an executive listening to this and he's heard these 4 C's for the first time, or he's heard the one important thing you said was listen to the customers.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think they would measure where they're at? Like take a quick gut check of to find out, for real, like if they are that executive that's not listening,
Mm-hmm.
or they are. How would you guide an executive through to find that out?
Well, I would start by doing some surveys. Some surveys from your customers and surveys from anonymous employees. It would be a really good gut check.
Okay. Those are awesome. Anything that I'm failing to ask?
Now, I think you hit on some really key things. It's the leadership, their openness to, not being right all the time and not having all the answers. I think the best leaders ask great questions. And
that's gold right there.
Yep. Keep the curiosity, stay humble. Because there's a sure sign of failure that I've seen in every retailer was when that senior executive team stopped listening, stopped being humble, stopped being curious.
When I was reading your information and the emphasis you put on staff, I thought of one of the most recent examples of shopping in a store for clothing was at I think a Hollister store, and I tried to hire the guy who was helping me. I really pushed hard to hire him. I spent way more money than I had intended. I bought me stuff. I bought my kids stuff. Like I bought all, and he was so great. He spotted me. He came over. He held my, the clothes we were looking. He was phenomenal, and that was just, and I wondered, is that a training program? Are they trained this way? I've been to that store before. I hadn't experienced the same, or is it just the individual? So, in that. Can you train someone to be great in the store, or do you have to look for something in that interview process to bring them in that is different? How much of that is training? How much of it is the right people?
I think if you hire for good attitude, because it's hard to train attitude. So if you hire for good attitude, you can train the other parts, because the other parts are kind of just like, role playing, and if they do this, then you do that. So that part of it is simple, but having a great attitude and a great just personable approach is difficult to train. But finding people like that and retaining people like that shouldn't be difficult if you have the right management teams in place, because they should be seeking out those types of people and being able to retain them, because they create an environment that feels good to work in. And you can see it in pockets. You just described one that you had a great experience, and it shouldn't, unfortunately, that those are few and far between. They
are. I'm trying to think of, and all I can think of is ones that do it really poorly.
Yeah. But it all comes back to people, and it's in the leadership and the motivation and the engagement. And motivation and inspiration is kind of like bathing. It doesn't stick. You got to do it every day. You have to engage your people and make them feel great about coming in.
That's a great way to look at it. It's one thing that I've had to learn over the last couple of years is our mission, vision, and values, and who we are and how we do work here. I'm done talking about it when my staff are mimicking me every time I say it, and they can say it as well. That repetition, and I think we get as executives, we think, okay, I said it,
Therefore,
therefore
It's
it's
done.
decreed, right?
Yes.
And it's done. Everyone's got it, and I'm having to learn that is not the case.
Mm-mm.
So tell me about your consulting company. If someone's watching this and they're like, you know what, we are doing a really poor job, and I'm really concerned about trying to keep up with Amazon and trying to get people in my store, and never thought of this experience. I have no idea if I'm listening. What do you do? So tell me about how you can help retailers thrive.
Yeah, well, I would love to sit down and chat with the management team and learn about how things work. What's the current state and what are their concerns? And then be the fly on the wall and go and experience what the customer experiences, and then be able to bring that back to them with here are the key points that I've seen that look like are big opportunities, the low-hanging fruit that we could tackle easily, and you'd have a big win on implementation of some changes. So it starts with a conversation and just experiencing what the customer experiences.
Focus on the customer. I think that's a thread I've heard a lot while we're sitting down. Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
For our viewers, I think this is so relatable to any topic, any type of retailer, whether we're talking about affiliate marketing, if you're an affiliate marketer, affiliate manager, listen, be humble, and it starts with the customer. It's got to start with the customer, right?
Absolutely.
And if you don't, you fail, especially with Amazon, where they focus solely on the customer, and they're doing so many things right. So brick and mortar isn't going away, is what you're saying.
No, it's here to stay.
85%. I would have thought if I said 50, it would have been high.
Yeah, no, it's pretty
That's
shocking.
crazy. So there's still a huge market out there.
There is.
Awesome. And so how can people get a hold of you if they want more information or need your help?
Sure. My email is mkwquinn@yahoo.com.
Awesome. And we'll put a link to maybe your LinkedIn and your email in the notes.
Great.
And so this was a little different today, a little longer form for the JEB YouTube channel. Let me know if you liked it. If you have questions for myself or for Mickey, put them in the comments below, and we'll both get to them as quickly as possible. I promise to answer every single one and forward any over to Mickey. And if you're looking for help with your retail marketing, your culture, your leadership team, Mickey's definitely here to help. So awesome. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much.
Thanks.